9 years later, I heard boots on the porch before I heard the knock, and some old animal part of me already knew whose they were. But I have to start where it actually started, which was a blizzard, and a door I almost didn't open. Hollow Pass had been dying by then for going on 3 winters. The gray bloom had come up out of the lowland rot and spread along every draw and creek bottom south of the ridge, and once the spores took a valley, nothing walked out of it right. Sheep went blind. Men who breathed too deep of a bad wind started coughing up something that wasn't blood but wasn't far from it. I'd buried 2 of the Hollow's own that first year, and after that the road below us closed for good, and it was just the high cabins and whoever was too stubborn or too poor to leave. I was both. 40 years a field medic and trapper does that to a person. The knock that night wasn't a knock at all. It was a body, falling against the door and sliding down it. I opened up expecting a drift of snow, and found a child instead, silver-skinned, small enough to fit against my chest like a bundle of kindling, with a fringe of gill slits along her throat working slow and wet and wrong in our air. Ilth, I knew, though I'd only ever heard the word traded around trading post fires like a rumor. Her cloak was shredded at the shoulder like something had tried to take an arm off with it. I did not think about it. I carried her to the fire and I got the wet clothes off her and I put every blanket in that cabin over her small shaking body, and I sat up the whole night listening to those gills work themselves calmer, one labored pull at a time. She didn't speak for 4 days. When she finally did, it was one word, in a voice like river stones knocking together. A name, I understood eventually, that wasn't hers but her mother's, said the way you'd say it to someone you were afraid had died. I told her my name back. Odessa. She tried it out slow, like a new tooth coming in, and something in her face unlocked a little when she got it right. I called her Wren, because she moved like one, quick and low to the ground, always near a door. I want to tell you the next weeks were simple. They were not. Word travels strange in a dying pass, slower than gossip, faster than law, and within a month I knew 2 things I wished I didn't. The first was that Ilth blood, drawn and reduced right, cut the gray bloom's grip on a poisoned lung like nothing else humankind had found. The second was that a man named Coulter Race had been working the low trails for the better part of a year, with 4 riders and a standing offer. Good coin, no questions, for any Ilth found breathing. Coulter came to Hollow Pass itself in the dead of that second month, sat in Ansel Fry's trading post with his boots up on another man's crate, and made his offer plain to anyone who'd listen. A vial of processed ichor a season, he said, in trade for the girl. Nobody in the Hollow was well. Old Perot's grandson was drowning slow in his own chest. Half the graves that first winter had been children. I would be a liar if I told you I didn't sit with that math for one whole night, alone, with Wren asleep behind the wood stove and my own conscience laid out on the table like a hand of cards I didn't want to play. I did not take the offer. I want that understood plainly, and I will not dress it up as an easy thing. I told Ansel to tell Coulter that the girl wasn't a well to draw from, and if he wanted her blood he could ask her himself when she was grown enough to say no to his face. Ansel told me I'd get half the Hollow's dead added to my ledger for it. Maybe he was right. I have never been able to prove him wrong, only to live with the choice. What I did instead was teach her the pass. Every deadfall, every game trail, every place the ice bridged over rock, and every place it lied to you about that. I taught her which berries a body could eat and which ones only looked like they wanted eating, and how to read a sky an hour before it turned mean, and how to sit dead still in a blind long enough that the mountain forgot you were there at all. She learned faster than any pupil I'd ever had, human or otherwise, and I came to understand that was its own kind of grief. A child who'd had to get good at surviving, because surviving had already been asked of her once, in some other cold place, before I ever opened my door. She learned to move through hollow country the way I had learned it 40 years before her, out of the same hard necessity, and within a year she could vanish into that terrain like she'd been carved out of it. Some evenings I'd lose sight of her not 30 feet from the cabin, and only find her again when she wanted finding, crouched behind a stump with her gills flared wide and calm, watching me hunt for her with something close to amusement in that small silver face. Those were good evenings. I did not have many of them in that decade, and I have kept every one. Coulter came for her in the spring thaw of the 3rd year, when the trail down to my cabin opened enough for horses. There were 3 of them by then, not 4. The balloon takes riders same as anyone, and I suspect it had already started working on Coulter himself, judging by the wet sound under his words. He didn't bother with an offer this time. He'd brought rope. I will not make more of what happened on that mountain than it was. It was not vengeance and it was not spectacle. It was a woman who knew every deadfall on her own land against 3 men who did not, in a place built by nature, to punish exactly that kind of ignorance. One horse went through river ice that wasn't ready to hold weight. One man took a fall down a scree slope he didn't know was there and did not get up walking. Coulter himself I put a rifle on from 40 feet, in full daylight, no ambush in it, and told him the same thing I'd told Ansel. She isn't a well. He believed me that time. He rode out of Hollow Pass and I never saw him again, and I have chosen since then not to wonder too hard what became of him. Wren watched all of it from the tree line, where I'd told her to stay, and said nothing about it after, and I never asked her to. She grew the way children grow when the worst of the danger has finally passed over them. Quieter some years, fiercer in others, taller than me by the time she was full-sized, with a way of standing in doorways like she was still deciding whether they were safe. At 19 she told me she was going down through the Bloom country, alone, to find what was left of her people, and I did not try to stop her. You do not spend 9 years teaching a child to survive and then act surprised when she uses it. I did not expect to hear from her again. I want to be honest about that too. I had made my peace with it as a kind of grief you carry quietly, the way you carry every choice that cost you something and was still right. Which brings me back to the boots on the porch. I am old now in the way the hollow makes you old, Bloom lung finally catching up with me the way it catches up with everyone who stays this long, and I had not expected to see another spring. She came in with the cold still on her coat and knelt by my chair without a word and opened a case full of vials, dark and reduced and unmistakably her own, and set to work on lungs that had given up asking to be saved. 9 years, and she'd found her people, and found the means, and come back up through country that kills strangers to pay a debt I had never once asked her to keep track of. I told her she didn't owe me this. She looked at me the way I must have looked at her that first blizzard night, and said the only rich flat thing there was to say. She said, "You didn't ask for a debt. You just didn't sell me. That's the only kind that counts. I'm breathing easier tonight than I have in a year. Outside, the gray bloom still owns every valley south of the ridge, and it will for a long while yet. But there is a fire going, and there is a grown woman asleep by it who was once a half-frozen child at my door, and whatever else this pass has taken from me over the years, it never once made me sorry for the night I opened that door instead of leaving her out in the snow.